Right.
Good afternoon and welcome to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Each week, I invite an expert from the world of business to share their knowledge, insights, and tips to help you with your business challenges. If there's a topic you would like covered, or if you feel you can make a contribution, please email me at yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie, and perhaps we'll be having a chat here one day soon. I'm delighted to welcome back my guest today. My goodness me, we haven't spoken for some time, but he has such varied and colourful history. Let me just give you some samples of it. He's a champion speaker and wordsmith with a business background in sales, advertising, and direct marketing. As a classified ad manager on the Daily and Sunday Express, he tripled revenue in 1 year, and he was a senior copywriter at Reader's Digest for 8 years and ran his own direct marketing creative agency for several years before starting a training business in 1994. He is a UK Business Speaker of the Year 2011-12 and past Silver Medallist in the World Championship of Public Speaking. His specialist skills are public speaking, advanced communication skills, and copywriting. Briefly, he helps people speak in a way that makes others want to listen to them. And on top of that, he's spoken and run training programs in communication skills and cross-culture in more than 20 countries. I'm delighted to welcome back to the You and Your Business studio, Phillip Khan-Panni. Hi,
Hello.
hi, how are you?
Doing well.
Doing well, fantastic. Great to have you back. I heard a talk of yours there recently, and I'd like you to tell our listeners what that topic was about because I think it's very relevant to the world in which they live in. It's always been relevant, by the way, but I think even more so today.
Yeah, I was talking about telling the right story and telling it well. What do I mean by the right story? Well, in very simple terms, I think almost every business gets it wrong in their business presentations because they say, this is what we do, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is how we do it. And really, nobody cares. And so the elements, the principal elements of the right story are, how will I benefit? Why should I care? And what will I lose if I don't accept your proposition?
Right,
Now pause that for just a minute, because if I say people are telling the wrong story,
right,
what will be the right story? So let me park that on one side for a minute and say that throughout my business life, I've thought that people were telling the wrong story, either because whatever story they were telling was boring, or because it was not relevant, or it was self-centered and so forth. You
yes.
mentioned my success in the Daily and Sunday Express when I tripled the revenue, actually in less than 1 year. I was given a target, double the revenue in 1 year or you're fired.
Right,
So I
okay.
tripled it in 10 months. Now, what did I do differently? Well, I did a number of different things, but the main thing I did was I stopped selling space.
Right,
Everyone in classified advertising those days used to talk about selling space. We can tell you this much space in our paper to place your ad. I stopped that and I said, no, wait a minute. Why does anyone advertise? Particularly, why are they advertising job ads? It's
right,
because they're looking for people. They're looking for particular kinds of people. So I thought, what can we do to bring the people together with the advertisers? Why do people read news? I mean, who reads newspapers? People read newspapers. People
yes.
are advertising in the newspapers. Why don't we do something to connect them in some kind of way? And I organized kind of a reward system. If anybody got their job from my paper,
Yes.
I would give them a reward. And there was a newly set up life insurance company called Hambro Life. And I went to saw the boss of that company, and I said, look, you got a new company. You want to publicize it. I will give you free advertising in exchange for something. What I want is for you to give a free life insurance policy, not a huge one, but something, life insurance policy to anyone who gets a job in my paper. And I will run a banner ad every day advertising your company.
Right.
And so they thought about that, and he said to me, okay, pitch it to my directors, which I did. And then they all thought that's quite a good idea. So And instead of simply saying, we will carry your ads, we said, we will carry your ads and we will give a reward to people who actually respond to your ads and successfully.
Right.
So that was a completely different way of looking at things. So coming up to date now, what I say to companies is, when you deliver your presentation or you produce your business presentations and say, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is how we do it, and so on, scrap that because nobody cares.
Yes.
Tell them instead how they will benefit, because nobody's interested in you except in terms of what they will get, how they will benefit if they accept your proposition. Does that make any sense to you?
Yes, of course it does. It's what's in it for me syndrome.
Yeah. And some years ago, in fact, when we launched the Professional Speaking Association, I was one of the co-founders, as you know,
Yes.
back in 1999, I introduced in England the idea of the elevator speech.
Right.
Nobody in the room had heard of the elevator speech. Now, I didn't invent it. I simply learned about it in America, and I brought it over, and I mentioned the elevator speech. Nobody knew what the hell that was. So I said, okay, here's a very simple thing. Tell me, we meet in a business environment, conference or whatever, and I ask you, tell me, what do you do?
Yes.
And the answers, predictably, were, I'm a label,
Yes.
and I do this, and I do that, and I do that, and so forth. And I would say, please stop. No, please stop. If you meet people like that in a networking meeting, for example, you ask them, what do you do? They pin you to the wall and they speak without stopping for 3 or 4 minutes, telling you how wonderful they are.
Yes.
And I said, no, the elevator speech actually helps you to understand how to shift your focus
Right.
and talk in terms of what benefit you might offer to the right person, because nobody can be relevant to every person around.
Yes.
You have to identify who the right person is, and so you should follow the rules of a sales pitch.
Right.
See, in a sales pitch, as you know, is no good wandering in and saying to somebody, I can offer you this, and this, if they have no need for that. So the first thing you have to do is establish that they have a need. Don't you agree?
I do, and this is one of the biggest mistakes I think people make. They don't
Yeah,
establish that people have a need for them.
yeah. So when I started introducing the idea of the elevated speech, they said inevitably, well, what would be your elevator speech? So I said, all right, ask me, what do you do?
So
Go
what
ahead.
you do?
Well, you know how some people are scared stiff about speaking in public,
Yes.
and others make presentations that are really boring.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, which means that they don't give the best account of themselves. But what I do is to help them speak in a way that others want to hear them.
Okay, tell us
Okay.
more.
Now, let me deconstruct that. I started off by saying, you know how some people are scared stiff about speaking in public? Well, you immediately agreed, you recognized that. So we have a yes, yes. Then I said, and other people make presentations that are really boring. I mean, have you not sat through a boring presentation once or twice? Of course you have.
Too many.
So you have already acknowledged that we have common ground. So then I say the consequence of that is that these people who give you the wrong kind of story, they don't do themselves justice. They don't give the best account of themselves. So I'm not criticizing them. I'm just saying, what a shame.
Yes.
So then, only then am I entitled to say what I do to improve that situation. And I help people to speak without fear and in a way that makes others want to listen to them. You see, it's full of benefit, and it has nothing to do with how clever I am, how skilled I am at what I do. I'm simply talking about how I can offer a benefit in the situations we have already identified. Does it make sense?
Yes, of course it does. And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Phillip Khan-Panni, and we're just talking about the advantages of an elevator speech, not an elevator pitch now, elevator speech. and it just makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Please continue with that, Philip, because
Okay.
explore that a bit more.
Now, some years ago, I was coaching a group of people in an advertising agency. And we were talking about how you can make a presentation that is persuasive. Because after all, that's the business they are in. And they have to produce presentations for their clients which are persuasive.
Yes.
And I said, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. The sequence of persuasion has long been identified as being the AIDA, attention, interest, desire, action. And what that simply means is you cannot sell anything to anybody unless you first have their attention, because that engages their interest. So if you do that successfully to begin with, then you have the beginnings of the conversation that will take them from where they are to
Yes.
where you want them to be, from being neutral to your proposition to actually wanting it. So first you got their attention, then you have to build up their interest by piling on the benefits to the point when they find your proposition irresistible. That is the point of desire.
Right. Right.
Okay? Now, that has to be quite high, because at some point you have to reveal the cost. It's not just a financial cost, there's an inertia cost. Like, I've always done things this way, why should I change?
Yes.
So if once you reveal the cost, the tendency for the interest to diminish slightly, you kick it up again, and then what do? You walk away? No. You have to do something about it. You have to tell them how to get it and make it easy for them to buy. And I say that this is exactly how we buy. We follow that same sequence when we buy things. So, a young man who happened to be an art director in this advertising agency said, "That's old hat."
Really? All right. Okay.
I said, "Yeah, but people are old hat. People have been buying along the same lines for
Yes.
forever. So just because it's old hat doesn't mean it's invalid." And I thought, now that's very interesting. Some people seem to think that you have to keep changing things and reinventing the wheel. And it's not necessary. If it works, follow it.
Yes, of course. But people are always trying to complicate things. So, what do I say about business? Business is simple until you allow human beings near it.
Yeah, yeah. So, okay, now I've been training people in business leaders since 1994 with this kind of approach, this kind of
Sure.
message. And how did I start? Well, I was working as a freelance copywriter because I had a business before that, and it folded because
Right.
my first wife died tragically,
Oh,
so I closed everything down. I was working as a freelance uh, copywriter and not enjoying it. And one day, a friend of mine who was the president of a company in America was over staying with me in England. And he said, "Listen, old friend, at your age, you don't need this kind of nonsense. Why don't you do that training business you've been talking about?"
yes.
There and then, I went and sat at my computer and I typed out and printed out some training modules following the kind of thinking that I've just been discussing with you.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
He looked at it and he said, this is great. And then 8 weeks later, I was in business. I just rang up advertising agencies and I said, "Look, this is the kind of approach I could help you with. Would you like some?" And that's how I started the business. Just like that.
Wow. And again, there's so many lessons there for business people today. When you think back, you might remind us of that acronym that you use and just explain it again because I think it's worth repeating.
Well, the AIDA?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. It's attention, interest, desire, action. You have to remember. Look, in any sale, first of all, if you haven't got their interest, you haven't got their attention, you can't sell them anything.
No.
And then secondly, if they have to want it, otherwise the sale will fail. Okay, so you have to take them from being neutral to really wanting it. So you start off by grabbing their attention by saying or doing something unexpected. So once you've got their attention, don't waste it. You now have to build on that, and you build on it by piling on the benefits, always in terms of how they will benefit. And you pile on the benefits take them to a level well past what I call the buying level. The buying level is the point at which they say, okay, I'm ready to buy. And they take them well past that so that they think, this is the proposition I've got to have. Now, that is the point of desire. So you've got their attention, you've built up their interest to the point of desire.
Right.
And at that point, what many salespeople do is that they walk away. They walk away because they're afraid of the rejection. So they say, okay, let me know if you want it.
Right, okay.
No, but you have to take the action. You have to take the action. You take them up to the point where they say, I like this. I'd like to have it. How do I get it? How do I get it? So don't walk away. Tell them how to get it, but make it easy for them to buy so that they don't feel that in some way you push them. They feel, yep, this is good. Now, I would like to have it. I would like to buy it from you. Don't sell it to me. I want to buy it from you. Does that make sense?
Yes, of course it does. Let's just talk about, again, what you've identified. People trying to push themselves nearly onto somebody and create a story about themselves that's so brilliant they think people will automatically buy from them.
Yeah.
And often that's accompanied by PowerPoint. What are your thoughts about PowerPoint?
I think PowerPoint is totally misunderstood. It can be a very, very good vehicle, but it's usually totally misunderstood. The point about a slide, let me spend a few seconds just talking about the function of a visual aid like a slide.
Yes.
It cannot replace the presenter, and it should not compete with the presenter. Now, here's a simple rule. Nobody can read and listen at the same time.
Yes.
So the moment you put up a slide that requires reading, you're interfering with your own delivery, your own presentation. Okay? So
Yes.
the function of the slide is to reinforce what you, the presenter, are saying. So people should be able to look at the slide and instantly know what it's about.
Yes.
And then it reinforces. So there's a simple rule. Never have more than 5 lines and never have more than 5 words in a line. So the 5 times 5 rule. We haven't got time. I can explain the science behind that, but take that as a simple guideline. The 5 times 5 rule. Never more than 5 lines, never more than 5 words on a line. And fewer would be better.
Right. And you would never read that slide to an audience.
Exactly. I was doing a training session at Harrow School some years ago, and they were sixth formers, and they were being taught how to make presentations.
Right.
So I asked them, now, have you been shown how to use PowerPoint? And they said yes. And you're doing slides and so on. Yes. And do you ever read the slides? And they said yes.
Yeah.
I said, no, wait a minute. Who was the first person that used to read to you? There was a long pause, and someone said, my mum. I said, yes, and what was the reason for her reading to you? What time of day was it? And what was the reason? To put me to sleep. And they all got the point. They actually all got the point. They all started laughing at themselves.
Yes, of course. If you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Phillip Khan-Panni. And we were just talking about PowerPoint, and you made a very valid point about reading the text back and how often we see that.
Why? Why do people read the slide? We can all read. We can all read adequately. A few years ago, I was in Brussels. I was called in to coach the directors of a major financial institution who were going to do a presentation to all their clients.
Yes.
And I was brought in to coach them. And the first one came in was the vice chairman, and he brought his team with him, and they set up the slides. When they got to the third slide, I said, please stop.
Right.
Stop. It was a very complex slide with graphs and all things. And I said, please, who was it? Who made that slide? And his deputy sitting beside him said, "No, I did it." I said, "It's a very complex slide. Does that reflect your expertise?" He said, "Yes." I said, "How many years did it take you to learn your expertise?" He said, "Well, 7 years of education and then all so many years." So I said, "Wait, how long is this presentation?" He said, 40 minutes. I said, "In 40 minutes, you're going to be able to teach your audience all the expertise that took you so many years to learn." He said, "No, no, 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 you're going to humiliate me." Huh? I said, no, here's a simple little test. I handed him a text. I said, "Please read that so that you can summarize the whole page in, well, very quickly, in maybe a sentence or so. Could you do that?" And he said, "Oh, I think so." He started to read. I said, "While you're doing that, will you please listen to what I'm saying? Because I want you to be able to summarize what I'm saying." He said, I cannot do it." I said, "Isn't that exactly what you're expecting your audience to do?"
Very good. Very good, yeah.
And he thought, you could see the light bulb coming on.
Great, yeah.
So anyway, that so I like to use simple examples like that to take people into an actual situation so that they can realize it for themselves.
Yes. And I think that's a very important part, even in presentations as well, is allowing people to discover it for themselves because they feel they've got the aha moment, even
Right.
though you've pushed them along in a particular direction.
Yes. Yes. Well, I think that's the best way to bring about um, change. Whenever I run a training session, I say to people, "Look, please don't write a lot of notes because when you're writing, you're not listening,
Yes.
and you don't need a lot of notes for the session that I'm running because my purpose is to bring about some change in your thinking, attitude, or behavior. If you think differently, you will do differently. So if I cannot change your thinking, I have failed. So if I can change the way in which you look at this particular subject, you will automatically do it differently in future. And then it's a success.
Yes.
So that was the basis of the training that I used to run. And I say the same, when I make a speech or when I'm training people to make speeches for themselves, I always ask them, what's the purpose of the speech? And then
Yes.
they give me the usual kind of rubbish. And
Like
I say,
what? Like what?
no, it's very simple. The purpose of a speech, any speech, is to bring about change. Change in the thinking, attitude, or behavior. Because if there's no change, if no change takes place, what's the point of making the speech or delivering the presentation? Speeches and presentations exactly the same. The purpose is exactly the same. So aim to make change. Be clear in your mind about the change you want to bring about and why it's of benefit to the person you're asking to make the change.
Well, yes, I think that makes so much sense. I suppose in the last about 3 minutes or so we have left, you're an author of so many books.
Yes.
Would you like to tell our listeners about your most recent book? And
My most recent book is called The Man Who Gave Away His Lottery Win.
all right,
It looks like a novel, but it actually is uh, it's about an encounter between two people, and they have a long dialogue, actually about the way in which we communicate. So I sent a draft of this book for a writing competition, and they sent it back and said, "No, it's too much self-help in this book.
all right,
It doesn't qualify as a novel." So, but The Man Who Gave Away His Lottery Win is really about a man who has thoughts in his mind about how people communicate and how they should communicate, and he finds someone who is involved in sales, and he has a conversation with him. So they discuss the way in which both people think about the whole communication process. And it because it's mainly dialogue, it's
right.
so easy to read, and it's available on Amazon.
Good, and that's it. Get that plug in there, Philip. And because it's one of many novels you've got, would you, out of all of the other ones that you've written, which do you think our listeners would benefit most from reading?
One is called Stand and Deliver, Leave Them Stirred, Not Shaken.
Right.
And
Okay.
that's about how you make speeches and things. And but for serious business people, there's one that was commissioned by the Financial Times, and it's called the FT Guide to Making Business Presentations.
All right. Right. Would you like to give us a sneak preview of that in the minute and a half we've left?
Well, it's right here in my hand.
Good. Never miss an opportunity.
It says, this is the best kind of how-to book, gives you insights as well as techniques, helps you to understand how people listen, how to connect with your audience, and how to be compellingly persuasive. And that came from the chairman of a company called Effective Image Limited. So that tells you all the things you need to know to make a business presentation and deliver a winning message.
Right. And I think there's something you've identified there which people are very poor at, listening.
Yeah, yeah,
Have you anything to comment on that?
absolutely. Most people seem to think that communication is about transmission, but it's not. It's about the way it's received and understood. And when you realize that, then you know how people think. Now, remember, most people can listen, or rather, most people can think at about 500 words a minute. If you're presenting, you're presenting at 130, 150 words a minute, which means there's a big surplus capacity in their brains. And that surplus capacity is not going to remain dormant. They're going to be thinking about other things while you're presenting. So you have to recognize that and learn how to cope with that and bring them back, keep them on track with you.
Right. And that's very, very important. For people who would like to find out a lot more about you, Philip, where can they do that?
Well, there's a couple of websites. One of them is with my name, Phillip, Khan-Panni.com, and there's another one called speakingandpresentationskills.com.
Right. Well, that's a fantastic way to finish the show. Thanks very much for our guest today, Philip Khan-Panni, for all of your advice, information, and how to follow you up. Thanks also to Sam on Sound. The podcast of today's show will be available on dublincityfm.ie from tomorrow. Thank you for your company. And please remember to join me, Alec Drew, again next week at the same time, 12:30, right here on 103.2 Dublin City FM for another edition of You and Your Business.
All done?
All done. I'll just stop the recording. Stop the